This is an Eyewitness News election update. I'm Mike Marza. Several developments in the last few hours in the race for New York mayor, including this.
Well, you criticized Andrew and you called him names. You know what? And he called me names. But you know what? Now it's time to fight for the family. And I'm going to fight for the family with Andrew Cuomo as the next mayor of the city of New York.
So there was Mayor Adams today endorsing his one-time recent foe, Andrew Cuomo, to take his job. And it comes less than 24 hours after that final fiery debate ahead of Election Day. Cuomo going after the frontrunner, Zohran Mamdani. The frontrunner called out for not answering certain questions. We'll dig into all of that. The election now 12 days away. Will the debate or this new endorsement change anything? We're going to talk about it all with our ABC News political team. First up, here's NJ Burkett.
It seemed unthinkable just a few weeks ago, but Mayor Adams stood outside a public housing complex in Harlem and endorsed former Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Am I angry that I'm not the one taking down Zohran, the socialist and the communist? You're darn right I am. But you know what? The city means more to me than anything. And it is time for us as a family to come together.
It was a stunning turnabout.
Andrew Cuomo is a snake and a liar.
Just last month, Adams accused Cuomo of trying to sabotage his campaign and vowed never to drop out.
We've come too far to go backwards. That is not going to happen. Yes. Well, you criticized Andrew and you called him names. You know what? And he called me names. But you know what? Now it's time to fight for the family.
Zohran is an existential threat to New York City, and we all have to do our best to make sure that Zohran does not become the next mayor.
It all comes after what was widely acknowledged as a strong debate performance last night by the former governor.
I did things. You have never had a job. You've never accomplished anything. There's no reason to believe you have any merit or qualification for 8.5 million lives. You don't know how to run a government. You don't know how to handle an emergency.
He's a desperate man, lashing out because he knows that the one thing he's always cared about, power, is now slipping away from him.
Campaigning in the subway today, Republican Curtis Sliwa downplayed the endorsement.
So I know they're going to be celebrating today, but when I look at them today, two corrupt birds of a feather flocking together, they deserve one another.
Here's what Mamdani told reporters this afternoon.
You know, 1 year ago today, we launched our campaign. And on that day, we made clear that Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo are two illustrations of the same broken politics. And today will be an illustration for New Yorkers of the fact that Eric Adams' record is Andrew Cuomo's agenda.
Our thanks to NJ Burkett. ABC News Deputy Political Director Ben Siegel joins me now. Ben, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So just hours, actually not even hours, moments after that debate ended last night, we saw the two, now friends, Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Adams at the Knicks game. And so it kind of gave this precursor to this widely anticipated endorsement. And it came today. My question to you is that endorsement going to change anything in this race? How significant is it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It might be too little too late for many New Yorkers, if only because Eric Adams is still going to appear on the ballot. So that by itself could make it more difficult for Andrew Cuomo to really consolidate the anti-Mamdani support. But in terms of maximizing visibility, I think it's taking advantage of this moment, this high-profile moment in this campaign, the final debate, using the attention from that to then pivot into this announcement was probably the most effective way for Cuomo to do it at this stage. But again, is it enough to really outrun what was a weak debate performance in his first debate and just blunt the momentum of Mamdani that has been steadily building from the primary victory? I think it's hard to say. It's still definitely going to be an uphill battle in these last couple of weeks here.
But he is making progress, at least according to some people who have been watching this race. And today they said, okay, that was a more positive performance by Andrew Cuomo. We heard a little bit of it in NJ Burkett's package, but in the story that we just showed you. We'll show a little bit more about how Andrew Cuomo really seemed to be sharpening that attack, criticizing Zohran Mamdani's experience or lack thereof. Let's listen.
I did things. You have never had a job. You've never accomplished anything. There's no reason to believe you have any merit or qualification for 8.5 million lives. You don't know how to run a government. You don't know how to handle an emergency.
The issue is that we have all experienced your experience. The issue is that we experienced you taking a $5 million book deal while you sent seniors to their deaths in nursing homes.
Zoran, your resume could fit on a cocktail napkin, and Andrew, your failures could fill a public school library in New York City.
Ben, one thing that was pretty clear last night as you're watching this, Curtis Sliwa is still very much in this race. And you saw that back and forth that tried to materialize there between Cuomo and Mamdani. And then you had Curtis Sliwa making his points and kind of getting in between the two. And perhaps in just about 12 days, we'll be taking votes away from some of those candidates. So what do you make of how it all played out last night?
I think in the first debate, Curtis Sliwa really took the hammer to Andrew Cuomo in a way that was helpful for Mamdani, that at some points Mamdani almost sat back and was glad to let Sliwa and Cuomo bludgeon each other. I think in this debate, as you just pointed out from that clip, he was much more forceful in his criticism of Mamdani. I think he's trying to prove that he is the alternative. Obviously, he did not listen to those calls to drop out of the race, including from the boss of the radio station where he hosts a radio show. John Katzimatidis asked him to drop out, trying to consolidate support behind Cuomo. He has stubbornly refused to do that. But you saw there were some effective moments where they both sort of piled on Mamdani and really brought a challenge to him in this sort of core vulnerability in his political resume, essentially that it's not very long, that he doesn't have the experience to manage hundreds of thousands of city officials, tens of billions of dollars in a city budget, and a city that could see all manners of crises at any given day. I think Cuomo, from his controversies, and obviously his departure from office was in scandal, but I don't think anybody denies that he has had his fair share of experience in public life, and he was much more adept in this last debate in sort of highlighting the breadth of his experience. It's not just being the governor of the state. He was the Attorney General of New York State, and he was the director of the agency Department of Housing and Urban Development under President Clinton. So he knows bureaucracy. He knows how to work things through the system. There are people who say, well, he knows how to do that, but he's also a bully. He also has these issues of the sexual harassment claims against him. But I think in terms of just the length of the resume in public life, I don't think there's any denying that he has just more experience in that regard, and that is the big vulnerability for Mamdani. But again, whether or not that is sufficient to really blunt his momentum and his very positive affirmative message about New York that people seem to be resonating, seeing value in, I think is the question.
Well, you mentioned housing, and I want to get to that in just a couple of seconds here because that came up last night. But Mamdani really being challenged not only from his opponents, but also the moderator last night, who I thought did a fantastic job in steering the conversation and asking tough questions to all three candidates. But Mamdani faced a question that really wasn't that tough. He talked about 6 ballot proposals that are on the ballot, and they deal in large part with affordable housing. Let's let you watch this, see how it played out, and then I want to talk about it on the other side.
There was reference to the 3 housing-related charter amendment questions. I know Mr. Cuomo is on the record as saying he favors them. We just heard Mr. Sliwa say that he's against them. Where do you stand on those?
I'm appreciative that those measures will be on the ballot and that New Yorkers will be able to cast their votes for them. I know that we desperately need to build more housing in this city, and I also know that the jobs we create in the building of that housing should be good jobs as well.
What a political answer. What is your opinion, Zoran?
Yes or no?
Come on.
Yes or no?
What is your opinion? Yes or no, Zoran?
Truth.
Don't be a politician here.
I got it. They're pointing out what I was about to.
Please
answer the question.
No, I think on the stage you can see 2 people appealing for the Republican Party's votes. And myself.
Answer the question. Answer the question for once.
My question to you was, do you support the 3 ballot amendment questions?
I have not yet taken a position on those ballot amendment questions.
Oh, what a shocker.
So heavily criticized for that non-answer today. And so let's catch people up. perhaps even, people who weren't aware that these questions are going to be on the ballot. But let's show you the 3 that we're talking about. It's, I mentioned 6, but really 2 through 4 are the ones that I want to highlight, Ben. My question to you is, first of all, what are these dealing with? Because this has been an issue here, the back and forth between Mayor Adams and the City Council, talking about affordable housing, how to build that, how quickly to build that. And then 2, wrapped into your answer, if you could just describe how you think Mamdani's non-answer will impact him, talking about the #1 issue that he's been campaigning on.
Yeah, well, I think you're looking at proposal 2 there on your screen, and big picture is that this cuts the time that it takes to get affordable housing projects in underdeveloped areas where there's maybe not affordable housing, getting them approved. It aims to cut that timing down from 7 months to a matter of 60 to 90 days, circumvents the City Council, which, according to some critics who focus on this issue, sometimes will block projects in their districts based on concerns beyond housing. So that is something that is on the ballot. We've seen Andrew Cuomo obviously was very clear he supported that, and many of the others. Curtis Sliwa said he was against them. And Mamdani, who I think one of his appeals is that he does not sound like a politician, was really the most political sounding of the 3 of them last night when it came to this question. He did not have an answer. He could not tell viewers and the moderators where he stood on all these questions. I mean, even the first one, which has to do, I think, with an Adirondack National Park and creating a different kind of ski.
Yeah, Olympic
ski
Sports
trails.
Complex
Yeah,
and
exactly.
a forest preserve, and something that seems, it's pretty cut and dry. Yes or no? Do you support it? Let's go back to the housing questions, because you mentioned #2. Let's go to 3 and 4, and we'll roll through them just to catch people up. Simplify review of modest housing and infrastructure projects. Ben, this is again talking about this project and process of getting this housing in a better spot in the city, right?
Right. Yeah, and this one is designed to speed up the process of creating multifamily units in smaller developments. So we're not talking about big developments, but maybe in multifamily homes or apartment buildings, construction projects that will maybe increase the amount of housing, just really speeding up that process there too. And again, this would have to do, this would effectively take power away from the City Council. And one of the concerns, one of the loudest groups criticizing these moves have been some of the unions in the city. Mamdani, as you heard in the clip that you played, referred to the good jobs that will be creating these housing. So there is concern that some of these moves will take sort of a seat at the table away from unions and union construction jobs. And #4 also has to do with the City Council. It has to do with establishing a new board that could overturn decisions made on affordable housing by the City Council. So it sort of takes away the authority from the mayor, takes away authority from the City Council, and would sort of create this new system for challenging what the City Council does in a way that its advocates say will be more equitable and reflect the opinions and the prerogatives of the city and its different communities. So again, and you've noted this before, Zoran Mamdani's background is in the state assembly, but he was also a housing advocate. This is somebody who wants to freeze the rent. It's one of his slogans when it comes to rent-controlled housing in this city, which is not every house, but it's clearly caught on in terms of people and the cost of living in the city. So in some ways, it's inconceivable that he really doesn't have any opinion, at least at this point, on how he's going to vote as a voter on these ballot measures on the topic that is really one of the main focuses of his campaign. So he did very much sound like a politician last night on that question.
I mean, just 30 seconds more on this, and then we'll move on, because I have one more interesting topic that a lot of people are talking about, not just here, but across the country. But Ben, I mean, let's, if you could, remove your deputy political director hat and then put on your campaign manager hat. Why would he not just answer that question? Is it that he doesn't want to alienate a certain side of the issue? Is it that perhaps he really hasn't formulated an opinion on it? What do you make of that?
I think, to put it bluntly, there's a lot of equities to weigh, and there's a lot of people on either side of the issue, and he is somebody who's trying to create a big tent. And, it's a little bit of give and get on every issue in the city. Like, are there some issues in his campaign that are maybe on the wrong side of some of his constituencies? And where do they fall on this issue? So it's a balancing act running for mayor, running for any office, especially in a city like New York, where there's so many equities, so many different interest groups. And clearly there is an effort here not to tip his hand on how he feels about this and at risk of maybe really getting on potentially the wrong side of the people on the different sides of this issue, and frankly taking power away from the mayor's office, which he could inherit after the election.
We'll see how it all plays out on the campaign trail. Again, the election November 4th, so we're ticking down the days for that. Now let's pull out a wider view, not just from New York and not just the tri-state, but in Washington, D.C., where there's this controversy of the demolition of the east wing of the White House to make room for President Trump's proposed grand ballroom. A lot has been made about just the images alone, the striking images of the demolition of the east wing. This structure has been in place for more than 100 years, and it's being brought down to construct this huge ballroom. A lot of criticism has been placed on the president, and the White House pushed back today saying plans do change, because at one point, President Trump said that the current structure would not be touched. The ballroom would be sort of an addition, and then that changed, and now the whole East Wing is being demolished. This housed the First Lady's headquarters since the Carter administration, I believe. So my question to you is, first of all, there are a lot of layers to this, because some people are questioning, does the president have the authority to do this? And from my reading, there is a commission on these types of projects that usually a president will take a project to that commission and they can green light it or not. I think the caveat in this particular project is that the president has said that the budget, which was $200 million, it's now ballooned to $300 million, will be paid through private donations, big companies, and perhaps even out of President Trump's own pocket as well. Is that how you understand it? Does he have the authority to do this?
It's just another example of how the president has sort of challenged preconceived notions of power in Washington, and how the system as it's designed does not really anticipate somebody sort of setting their own rules. If you look at and you're absolutely right, there are rules and bodies that are supposed to govern how you make renovations, how you build in Washington, especially around the core area that the tourists know well, the National Mall, the museums, the White House. There are a very strict set of rules that govern how that should work. I spoke to somebody who used to serve on one of those boards and in a former administration yesterday. And I was told about a process that took almost 2 years to get the design approved for a new security guard gate outside the White House, just to make sure that it conformed with the style of the rest of the complex. So that was just a single security guard booth. So that's sort of an example of how the process works. It's slow, but there is a sense of history and preserving the architectural vision of Washington, D.C. So it's pretty clear that that was run over roughshod here in this case. And there are questions about how this process worked, how it was followed, and then also, of course, with the funding is now private, he says, but there are also mechanisms for how these projects get built out, how these projects are supervised by Congress, even if the funding comes from other funding sources. So there are a bunch of layers to peel back here about how this came together, how it's getting put together, what rules are and are not followed. But the bottom line is that the president's in charge. And the same person I spoke to said, look, the Truman balcony where you see the president on Washington, July 4th.
Right. Well, no, continue your point, because I do want to talk about the history. This isn't the first president to make some renovations or to do large-scale construction projects. But go ahead and finish your point with Truman.
Yeah, I was just saying, apparently Truman had the balcony set up that you now see when it's maybe remembered most recently where the president appeared while he had COVID during the last presidential election. And it was also the place where the presidents watched the July 4th activities. That was not wanted. Nobody wanted that, and the President Truman just kind of forced that through. So at the end of the day, the president does have a lot of authority here. But historically, we've never seen anything quite to this scale.
Yeah, and I do think that, it's a popular topic. People are calling you asking about it. Perhaps,
yeah, they are. They're blowing me up.
But I do have to say, just the images now with all the video and the cell phone video, certainly didn't have that back in the day. When you look on the website for the White House, it shows that 13 previous presidents did do construction work, whether it was minor or major. So let's take you through some. I think we picked 7 that we want to show you. So 1934, you have FDR overhauling the West Wing, adding the second floor, and let's flip through them kind of quickly here, because then we go to 48. You mentioned Truman, total reconstruction of the White House's interior because it was falling apart, increasing the foundation and the footprint. 62, JFK, the modern Rose Garden, which we know was removed in recent time, the first Trump administration, I believe. President Nixon converting the swimming pool into the press briefing room that we see the press being briefed today. Gerald Ford installing the outdoor swimming pool on the South grounds. And that was in 75. 93, when President Bill Clinton undertook this renovation and refurbishing the executive mansion. And then the last one that we're going to highlight here is in 2009, President Obama with the basketball court. And so people are trying to pick apart the differences between those previous projects and today. Of course, the person is different, the projects are different, but the bottom line is other presidents have done work at the White House, but you can kind of pick out exactly what you have problems with the certain projects. You mentioned other presidents have faced backlash for certain projects, and I believe some were publicly financed, which would go through a different approval process, and some of the older projects that we just mentioned historically were also funded with private donations?
Yeah, so there's a whole range of things. I think the big takeaway is that even in these past projects, at least on some of the more recent examples, there were levels of oversight to these projects. For example, I believe it was Truman who went to Congress and had Congress create a commission that would supervise this project that he had to renovate it. The other appropriations that we're talking about, the money that Congress approves to fund things, I believe that was used as a funding stream to take care of some of those more recent other renovations that you mentioned, which means that Congress did have some oversight over the process. And then one of those commissions you mentioned, I'm forgetting the name because Washington is a town full of three-letter committees.
Soup
exactly.
And, the whole thing.
Yeah, but one of the commissions, is a public commission. Anybody can go see their meetings, and the White House in the past has presented plans for renovations to this commission. And the difference here apparently is that the White House did not do that with this commission for any of these plans in the East Room, and they now say they plan to do it sort of after the fact. Well, some people are saying it's a little too late for that because the East Wing of the White House is now being excavated and the debris is being taken out to help build out a golf course on the east side of town. So it's a little late for that, but the big takeaway is that at the end of the day, the president is in charge. The president has a right to change. The White House has the ability to do so. There are ways that other presidents have done it that have involved more oversight, that have involved a longer timeline, a little more input. And we know President Trump, he sort of sets his own path, and he's just doing that yet again in a way that is very visible and will leave a mark on the White House in the future as well, of course.
Yeah, and Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary today, was pushing back because people were questioning why now. It seems sudden. Even some conservative Republicans were questioning, removing just such a historical piece of the White House grounds without further notice. At least that was the criticism. But Caroline Leavitt today pushing back on that, saying plans do change. They're moving forward clearly with the demolition finished, and now they'll put that plan into place. And it's interesting because President Trump had made the argument that before these state dinners had to be under these tents on the South Lawn, and now you would have this huge ballroom. So we'll see how it plays out. Certainly the controversy is not over, and there is much more to be talked about with that issue and New York politics as well. Ben Siegel, ABC News Deputy Political Director, appreciate your perspective as always.
Thanks, Mike.
We want to continue now with our profile of the candidates in the race for mayor. We had Cuomo yesterday, but today we focus on Zohran Mamdani. Once again, here's NJ Burkett.
We can afford to bring down the rent, have world-class public transit, and make it easier to raise a family.
It was 1 year ago today that a 33-year-old assemblyman from Queens launched his bid to be the next mayor of New York.
This is New York. We can afford to dream.
At the time, few people knew who he was. Now, Zohran Mamdani is a household name in the 5 boroughs and across the nation. He used a series of viral videos to convey his message that New York was dealing with an affordability crisis. There was halal cart economics.
If you own the permit, then how much would you charge for the plate?
$7, $8.
And a polar plunge to signify a rent freeze.
I'm freezing your rent as the next mayor of New York City. Let's plunge into the details.
His style and his politics energized and polarized voters on all sides. And it certainly struck a chord, especially with younger New Yorkers. Mamdani cruised to a somewhat surprising and undeniably decisive victory in the June primary.
We have won because New Yorkers have stood up for a city they can afford.
Despite his victory, some members of his own party were slow to endorse him, and he was forced to explain what it meant to be a democratic socialist.
I think of the words of Dr. King, who decades ago said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And it gets to the heart of the matter, which is inequality. And my belief that every New Yorker should have what they need to live a dignified life.
He eventually won over progressives with ideas ranging from free buses and a rent freeze for rent-stabilized apartments to city-owned grocery stores and free universal child care. Ideas that will cost money.
We've put forward a plan that we would raise $10 billion in additional revenue, $9 billion from two major taxes. The first, matching the state's top corporate tax rate to that of New Jersey, 11.5%. That raises about $5 billion. And the second is increasing personal income taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers. These are New Yorkers who make $1 million or more a year, and only doing so by 2%.
Mamdani has maintained his front-runner status through the election season, even as opponents criticized his experience, his policies, as well as his past comments about the police and about Israel. President Trump is also taking aim at Mamdani, calling him incorrectly a communist, and saying he is not fit to lead. Still, the assemblyman, with his sights set on City Hall, remains undaunted.
I am wedded to the future of this city. This is a city that I love, a city that I grew up in, and a city that I want to grow old in, like each and every other New Yorker. And what concerns me is that President Trump's interest in our city oftentimes is one to make an example of us, to attack the very fabric of what makes so many of us to be proud as New Yorkers. And I am going to be the mayor who will stand up for New Yorkers.
NJ Burke at Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
And tomorrow we will hear from the Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa. If you want to see our Cuomo profile, it's up right now at ABC7 NY. A reminder, early voting now underway in Connecticut. In New York and New Jersey, early voting starts this Saturday, October 25th. Early voting in all three states ends November 2nd, and of course Election Day is November 4th. I'm Mike Marza. Full coverage of all the big races ahead of Election Day right here at ABC7 NY.